Hello, Rob Roselli here, coming to you once again. Clean TV on Facebook, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Tuesday and Thursday. Today being Tuesday, August 23rd, 2016. And again, the website boxofsunglasses.com and email info@boxofsunglasses.com and Twitter @Rob Roselli. And of course, I'm on Facebook, obviously. In the last several shows, we've been talking about the Freemasons, sacred geometry, this sort of thing, and how it's built into the really the occult control of the U.S. banking system, the U.S. political system. And since the U.S. is really, although it's slipping badly in these last days, as predicted in Revelation 17 and 18, as discussed on my website, under that link, under the Mystery Babylon USA link. You can read all about that. But anyway, the sacred geometry of the Satanists, and I'll just come out and say it, running the world, is there for all to see. I think it was William Shakespeare that said, all the world is a stage and we are its actors. Now, William Shakespeare was part of a group called the Rosicrucians. There were a group of mostly English, European, but mostly English thinkers, Isaac Newton, John D. Agrippa, several others, who really went hand in hand with the Renaissance, or the revival of European thinking, after around 1,000 years of shakedown and breakdown and control by the so-called Christian Catholic Church, which is a whole story in and of itself. And as an aside, the Catholic Church, often mistakenly identified as the whore of Babylon in Revelation 17 and 18. It is a subset, a very significant subset, but it is not the whore. The great whore is, in fact, the United States. There is no doubt about that. just beyond a shadow of a doubt. Okay, and we'll go through that in the next couple of weeks, line by line, of what's really there. How the whore is really the focal point of the world. And it's not, many so-called Christians have identified it as the physical Babylon over in Iraq, Saudi Arabia. I've heard all kinds of nonsense. Of course, the Catholic Church, but have no doubt it is the United States, led by this image of the beast, by the way. This multi-name scam, Barack Hussein Obama, Barris Otero, or whatever this guy's real name is, as the image of the beast and the son of Satan. We don't really know who this guy is. Well, scratch that, we do, but I'd rather not say right now. But I think I've dropped enough hints. But anyway, my books, again, boxofsunglasses.com, and there's 3 of them. Okay, this is the latest. Pleased to meet you. Okay, it's probably backwards, and I apologize. But anyway, it's available on my site, and it's a conversation between a Satan character and George Orwell's a character by the name of O'Brien, named after the representative of the establishment in Orwell's 1984, known as O'Brien, and they discuss historical events from a different perspective than what you're used to getting from Fox News and the O'Reilly Factor, and this lousy indoctrination that passes as public education in this country. The controlled education system, controlled by those tax-exempt foundations, Rockefeller, Ford, Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, etc., that control the colleges, the so-called universities, Columbia Teachers Colleges, all the Ivy League universities, University of Chicago, all controlled by the same creeps, same Satanists that brought us the Federal Reserve System, control the colleges, and that filters down into the so-called free public education system, and the dumbing down of America goes ever forward, not by accident, but by, in fact, design. Evolution, climate change, now with this multi-named son of Satan, image of the beast freak in the White House. Now we have transgenderism spreading throughout the schools, as if 5-year-olds don't have enough on their mind with all the nonsense going on in the world and in this country. Now they have to worry about men and women sharing the same bathroom. It's beyond. We're in free fall, is all there is to it. But anyway, Again, boxofsunglasses.com. That's the first book. Now, the second book, and we'll tie into tonight's discussion, which is we'll focus on the Rosicrucians and the Invisible College. Okay, something called the Invisible College, which gave rise to something called the Royal Society in Britain, and of course, from that came the British Roundtable groups, the Council on Foreign Relations, Skull and Bones, the whole gamut of what I call the Un-American Genocidal Complex. Okay, that's also available on my site. And keep these things in mind. The Georgia Guidestones, we may revisit these. Okay, we talk about these just about every show. What I like to call the anti-Ten Commandments of the spirit of Antichrist. Okay, as another aside, I refuse to talk about this comic book Antichrist. There is no Antichrist mentioned in the book of Revelation. There's a spirit of Antichrist mentioned in 1 John and 2 John. But all these characters running around trying to tell everybody that there's going to be a some kind of horned creature or something coming out of a rebuilt Jerusalem temple that has to be rebuilt, which isn't going to happen, and that's going to be the Antichrist, and brandishing people with 666s on their foreheads. It's just it's what I like to call kindergarten or Cartoon Network Christianity. It's just not going to happen like that. But anyway, getting back, the anti-Ten Commandments of the Georgia Guidestones brought to us by Robert Christian of the Rosicrucians, or the Rosy Cross, and that will have significance here in a few minutes. And of course, the offshoot of the Invisible College, the Rosicrucians Royal Society, America's very own Skull and Bones, the American Illuminati, okay, Skull and Bones, and of course tie in with the Georgia Guidestones most significantly because the Georgia Guidestones were the date right in them says they were dedicated or founded on March 22nd, 1980, which just so happens to line up exactly 30 years to the day of the signing of the Rosicrucian-based healthcare system in this nation. And we may get into that, but the Rosicrucians very much into control of the healthcare system. So just like Jesus was 30 days when he started his ministry, and according to the book of Luke, I think that's, I want to say Luke chapter 4, but don't quote me on that, Barack Hussein Obama, or the multi-named image of the beast scam in the White House, 30 years to the day of the founding of the Georgia Guidestone, signs into law this obscene healthcare bill, which reads like Rosicrucians. Okay, and I don't mean to go off on a tangent right now, but anyway, there are numerical tie-ins there, and maybe we'll get to that in a few minutes if the conversation leads us that way. But have no doubt, the point of being made here is that this occult theater, if you will, is happening all around us. Okay, and it's pervasive. It's everywhere. It's not going to stop. All right, dates, his history. Okay, geopolitical events are all timed and dated. Have no doubt. Okay, and we'll get into that a little bit tonight. But and here, of course, is the United Nations right here in Mystery Babylon or New York City, the focal point of world government. So you can see with just these three items alone, and of course the Darwinian support and support for Adolf Hitler, which is just a subset of the quote conspiracy. But it's all documented in this book. Okay, so you can see the pervasiveness of the quote conspiracy and how far it is. And another, again, let me just review my three principles that are the key to understanding what's going on here. And besides what I consider the prerequisite to this is watching and understanding John Carpenter's great movie They Live. Okay, that's the kind of mentality you really need to have to understand this show and see what's really going on. But the three basic principles are that Israel, the national Israel, physical Israel, are not God's chosen people. I'll never understand how so many so-called educated Christians and evangelical Christians and so-called theologians and experts can just keep getting this wrong. Even a lot of guys which aren't many of Christians that I have a lot of respect for and other authors, I just don't get it. Okay, the scriptures are very clear on this. Okay, I mean, you read Matthew 23 or Matthew 3, or even starting at Matthew 2, even it's just the Jews just don't have a clue, and then the four Gospels. I mean, and really throughout, after Paul makes his conversion, has his Damascus Road moment there in the book of Acts, Acts chapter 9. Even he had to be converted from Judaism into a born again Christian. Okay, so how you can sit here and say, you know, the Jews are God's chosen people when Jesus himself chased them out of the temple with whips and asked them how they can be escaping from condemned to hell, and they made a covenant with Judas, who was taken over by Satan, which is predicted in Zechariah chapter 11. Okay, you know, how you miss that, how you can sit there and say that Jews are God's chosen people is nearly impossible for me to believe. Okay, but that's just the bare fact. So forget all that, because that misleads so many people, and that's where you get this nonsense about a Muslim antichrist, or the Armageddon and everything. The United States is not involved in biblical prophecy because everything's centered on God's chosen people. It's all a pile of crap. So you have to throw all that out, unfortunately, and listen and just read the scriptures and what they say just in plain language. And that also segues. Well, excuse me. I mean, my first point is, obviously the Bible on this show is the core of the quote conspiracy, understanding and knowing it, and it's the infallible word of God, and that's just the bottom line. It's an all or nothing proposition. There's no negotiating. It's not up to interpretation. It's not up to giving in to the evolutionists with this nonsense called theological evolution or something like that, or whatever idiocy the churches are trying to convey by giving into the world. Okay, and already number two is we talked about the Israelites, and the fact is, if the Israelites are out, then somebody has to be in as the incurring the wrath of God in the end times, and that would be, of course, Mystery Babylon or the United States, which is the third principle, and that is very, very simply that the United States is the Mystery Babylon described in Revelation 17 and 18. There's no doubt about that. Okay, and to that end, okay, this is my first book, okay, and it's called They Live, John Carpenter's They Live, Great Society of the Undead, and it's available on my site as a PDF download. But again, if you can understand this pyramid right here, okay, you have this capitalist pyramid. Now, this is St. John's the Divine Cathedral, and we'll get into that on a future show. There's some very interesting numerical connections of St. John's the Divine to what's going on in the world, to Barack Obama, the environmental movement, and I've spent really the appendix, good part of section 3 in the appendix, in this very long book, which could really be broken down into probably 3 or 4 little sub-books, but I'm not Stephen King. I don't sell millions of books. I don't have a budget. I don't have editors. I don't have whatever, but this very long book in section 3 in the appendix, I think it's Appendix A, go through the St. John's Divine Cathedral very, very thoroughly, okay? But suffice it to say that this right here, which sits above the rose window or the western side of this church, and keep that in mind for the rest of the show, is similar to this pyramid right here, which we see on the back of our Federal Reserve notes. Now, of course, everybody from Bill O'Reilly to these liars on the History Channel will tell you, well, that's just conspiracy theory. That doesn't mean anything. That 13-level pyramid with the 14th, all-seeing eye, illuminated eye of Horus, or quite simply Lucifer or Satan, staring at you saying, we control you. But don't worry, Bill O'Reilly and the History Channel say that doesn't mean anything. It's just a symbol, just like this one here, St. John's Divine Cathedral, which has direct ties into the Invisible College and the Rosicrucians. And again, it's a big circle jerk of Satanist psychopaths that run this world, and that's really the point of this show and what I'm trying to convey here. So if you take Fox News seriously, or even the presidential elections for that matter, or anything, then you're probably wasting your time. And I'll just say that right now. Go out and campaign for Trump or Hillary or Bernie, whatever nonsense you think is worthwhile. But anyway, that's it. Okay. Now, these two pyramids are definitely connected. So let's go back in history. Now, remember, in another link, I have a link. It's in the Numbers. Okay, now you can find this if you go on boxofsunglasses.com. Oh, ancient Egypt still lives. Okay, there's a link there that discusses this very quickly. Okay, but if you go on the, where is it? I got so much information on the site, I have trouble finding it myself sometimes. But if you go on here and look under the, okay, I have the tree of knowledge of good and evil, okay, right here. So you're going to find this link. Well, if you go into the occultism of numbers, there's some information there as well that you will find on this, on what I'm talking about, which is just the basic, the occultism of what's going on with the numbers that we're talking about. Okay, so in other words, when they call the Freemasons call the god of their god, or Lucifer, who they really worship, they call him the great architect of the universe, GAOTU, great architect of the universe. This is what Freemasons call him. This is really what they're getting at. Okay, it's really the builder of the Great Pyramid. Okay, and really, okay, where you're going to find that link, excuse me, is under the Robert Christian link. Okay, R.C. Christian, and I have under there's 13 chapters. It just happens to break down into the 13th chapter, just like there's 13 levels of the pyramid, of the unfinished pyramid on the back of your Federal Reserve note. So if you go in the 13th chapter of the R.C. Christian page, you'll see a link on there called "It's in the Numbers." It's all the way down there, and it talks about this whole concept of the Great Pyramid and how you can, from the Great Pyramid of Giza, not only are they aligned, there's 3 pyramids in the complex, and there's the main pyramid and 2 other ones, that they align with the belt of Orion, with a mighty hunter who is analogous to Osiris, the main sun god character of ancient Egypt, or who equates to Apollo, the sun god of Greek mythology, and the Greeks just borrowed their mythology from the Egyptians, or that's the Apollyon of Revelation chapter 9, of the king of the bottomless pit. So this stuff all ultimately connects. So you'll see in there all the numerical connections, but the important thing for right now is that the angle of at the angle of 51.8 degrees of the side of the Great Pyramid, you get 2 very significant numbers that form the basis of our reality. One of them is called is numerical pi, and the other one's called the golden ratio, 0.618. So if you just remember your basic geometry, if you take the hypotenuse of a triangle that's equivalent to the Great Pyramid as 1.0, you come up with 2 very significant numbers. That's pi over 4 for the height, and 0.618, which is the golden ratio. Okay, and they form the basis of our reality itself. Okay, so now numerical pi, when you get into waves and waveforms and sound and visible light and just everything, if you remember from your high school, your college, physics classes, just the cycles of nature, okay, or not only the area of of a sphere and a triangle and all kinds of geometric shapes, okay, but that's, I don't want to turn this into a physics class, not that I was a great physics student, but that is the basis of visible light. So in other words, light comes at you at a certain frequency that repeats itself, and it's energy. It's just pulsating energy at a certain frequency. That's basically what light is, and the same thing with sound. Okay, sound is just different notes on a piano, or even the sound of my voice comes at you at a certain wavelength. Okay, and that's all based on numerical pi. And then as far as the golden ratio is, from it you can form a shape, spiral shape, and out of a spiral, I mean, you derive everything: a ram's horn, a shape of a hurricane, the Milky Way galaxy, DNA, which is, again, those 2 numbers, which are embedded in the Great Pyramid, which are there, okay, form the basis of our reality. And another interesting fact with the Great Pyramid is that the ratio of or the area of a circle whose height is the height of the Great Pyramid is equal to the perimeter of a square, okay, who's with that same height. So in other words, the area of a circle, okay, equals, if you take the radius, area equals pi r squared. If you take that radius of the height, the vertical height of the Great Pyramid, and you compare it to a square whose side is the equivalent to the base of the Great Pyramid, they're equal. Okay, so that's called squaring the circle. Okay, and that's just physically impossible to believe now. So when you watch these morons, these so-called Egyptologists on Nat Geo and the History Channel, you know, they're having a hard enough time trying to explain how a bunch of Egyptian slaves, you know, were able to lay the number of blocks in the Great Pyramid in the time constraints. You know, this Pharaoh Khufu, who's credited with, who never really claimed credit for it, by the way. It's just assigned to him by historians who don't want to step out of the box and say there's something much bigger going on here with the Great Pyramid and its construction by the great architect of the universe. Believe me, our criminal overlords know what's going on, and this is who they worship, a bunch of Satan worshippers, and we're going to get to that in a minute with the Invisible College, and tie this whole thing, you know, try and lasso this whole thing together. But anyway, just getting back, you have to believe that if you want to follow the evolutionist slash, you know, expert crowd, the Egyptologist Nat Geo crowd, you have to believe that a bunch of half ape Neanderthals that could barely walk and chew gum at the same time and just invented fire and a circular wheel, suddenly out of nowhere were able to build and design and build this stone structure in the middle of the desert that gives us numerical pi, the golden ratio, and it has just numerous, copious connections to the distances from the Earth to the Moon and the Moon to the Sun, and that's covered in that link. Okay, this link is probably it's a book in and of itself. Okay, it's 25. I'm gonna say it's 25 pages, and it's just packed with information. Okay. And it's all there. I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg, just to kind of set the tone for tonight's show, and try and keep this thing, try and keep the conversation as tight as possible. But that's the background of the Great Pyramid, and again, you see it here. Okay, again, you see it here. So don't try and say, or don't believe these guys that get on the History Channel and then this and that, and we've talked about that already, but. You know, again, this is U.S. News and World Report. Okay, Secrets of the Lost Symbol. You know, of course, there's that all-seeing eye again, which again is just conspiracy theory. But this is U.S. News and World Report. This is May 18th, 2010 edition. And of course, what they like to do is just kind of take things. You know, and so they can just kind of throw them out there as kind of half-assed, and yeah, that's just Dan Brown, you know, kind of, that's just fun stuff. It doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't mean anything that the height of the obelisk, okay, you know, another offshoot of similar symbolism to the Great Pyramid of Giza, which we just spent several minutes discussing. It doesn't really mean anything that thing's 555 feet in height, which just so happens to be 6,660 inches. That's just, and aligns with the womb of the Capitol building, the dome of the Capitol building, which is also called Columbia. Keep that in mind. Okay, Columbia, which really means, is associated with the feminine, which is associated with the East. Okay, Barack Obama went to Columbia University, supposedly, but he never went there. Okay. That's very important to keep in mind for right now. Just tuck that in the back of your head. So, anyway, it's just a coincidence. It doesn't mean anything that you have this phallus of the dead sun god Osiris, you know, aligning with Columbia or the Capitol dome of the building, which just so happens to have an equivalent. I think it's the Aphrodite. Okay, who sits at the dome of the Capitol building. Okay, it just so happens to equate with the wife sister slash wife of Osiris, the mythical sister slash wife known as Isis. Okay, sitting there. Okay, that doesn't mean anything either. So it's all just fun and games. Okay, somebody just did that as a practical joke, I guess. Just like the impending economic collapse brought to us by these people with this all-seeing eye and this pyramid, that doesn't mean anything either. The economy's not going to collapse. The stock market's doing fine. We're not going to have the planned chaos of our Satan-worshipping criminal Illuminati overlords, so you don't need to be listening right now. It's all a big joke. Okay, this is kind of what they're trying to do here. Our so-called, our bought and sold media with things like, the secrets of the lost symbol. But let's look at this a little bit. Okay, if you page through here, now there's Hermes thrice great. Okay, this is the equivalent to the Egyptian god Thoth. Okay, Hermes or Horus, which is equivalent to the sun god, or the son of the dead Osiris, and his whore sister, his mythical whore sister wife known as Isis. Okay, so as the story goes, for those you may not recall, we've discussed this in the past, but in mythology, so-called, Osiris was killed by his evil brother Set, which is the equivalent to the getting kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Okay, so Osiris, by being killed, represents mankind being evicted from the Garden of Eden way back there in Genesis 3. So in other words, our Freemason overlords are still on the side of Satan. Remember, Satan said, yea, as God said, you shall not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He knows when you eat the fruit, you'll be as gods, you'll become gods. So the Freemasons, our Satan-worshipping overlords, are still on the other side of that lie, is what it boils down to. So by the death of Osiris, the sun god of Egypt, Osiris, what that represents in mythology is mankind being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and the evil god, which is the god of Christians, which is the real God, they consider evil. So in other words, it's the polar opposite of the Bible, of what's going on here. Okay, that's why I say the Bible is the source of the conspiracy. Now you can be on this side of it, okay, the Christian side, or you can be on the Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, Rothschild, basically the world side of it, and come at it from that angle, okay? But that's the representation. Now Osiris was cut up into 14 pieces, hence and then only 13 were found. The missing piece was never found, was his phallus. Okay, his male member, which is Isis, made out of bricks or cement or concrete or whatever, which is represented by the erect obelisk in Washington, D.C., known as the Washington Monument, okay, or the Great Pyramid of Giza. So there's 13 pieces, just like there's 13 levels to the Great Pyramid on the back of your Federal Reserve note, and the 14th being the obelisk. Now she impregnates herself with this now 14th piece, and she spits out the son of God, Horus, or Thoth, or Mercury, or Hermes, okay? And that's basically the foundation of most world mythologies. I mean, mythology gets confusing, and, I think it's in Isaiah, I want to say 42, where God says your idols are wind and confusion. So there's a lot to that, but for the time being, just understand that that's the basic story. So it's right there in our faces. So when the 13 levels of the Great Pyramid on the back of your Federal Reserve note, that's exactly what's being represented. Of course, the all-seeing eye is the 14th piece. And that all-seeing eye, the third eye, you see it on the Egyptian pharaoh. Okay, there's a third eye on on some of a lot of the garb that they used to wear. Okay, that's what's being represented, is that genetically, spiritually, they were the offshoot of Isis and Osiris, and they were able to, quote, see. Now, see in the sense of Genesis chapter 3, your eyes shall be opened and ye shall be as God. So, in other words, these people worship Satan, who's a real character, who I believe is represented by this Robert Christian, who we'll get into a little bit tonight. This mysterious Robert Christian. That's the story, okay? And it's all right there. So it's all kind of It's all kind of bound up in right here, and again, this type of thing is thrown out there to kind of throw off the people, and it's just a big joke. It's just Dan Brown. It doesn't really mean anything. It's just a movie. It's all fun. People like me are just, you know, crackpot conspiracy theorists. We don't know what we're talking about and this sort of thing. Just go back to your sporting events. Don't worry about the economy. The stock market is fine. The economy is not going to suffer a precipitous and calamitous collapse of biblical proportions at any time because it's been set up that way. Don't worry about it. Everything is fine. The stock market is fine. Go back to your regularly scheduled programming of adult cartoons in this despicable, this decrepit show called The Walking Dead or whatever it is. Go back to that kind of crap. Don't worry about it. Everything's fine. But anyway, there it is, the Invisible College, okay, right here in U.S. News and World Report. Now notice the rose and the cross. You got the 1618 up here, and I realize this is backwards. You got baby Lucifer with a 1604 floating around, wrapped in a serpent. You got the hand of God, okay, reaching down, controlling this whole thing. But let's just go through this real quickly, okay. The rose and the cross. The rose represents the Greek god Eros, which has ties, if enough links over to the god of secrecy, or it represents silence, or the West represents basically the dead god Osiris. Okay, is represented by a lotus flower. Okay, and plants, and he's underground, he's dead, but every year he's giving the world plants and springtime and this sort of thing, and from his grave, but he's doing it in secret. Okay, and a rose is is associated. One of the flowers is associated with Osiris. So, and he's also associated, with the West. What happens in the West is sunsets, and another name for the West is Occident. Okay, so remember before I mentioned Columbia. Now, this half-assed, half-white image of the beast in the White House supposedly went to Columbia University. But there's no record of him ever attending there. So what is the deal? Why do they want to attach this guy with the name Columbia? And why do they want to attach, also, why did he go to Occidental University? We don't know if he went there either, because remember, all his records are sealed. Okay, we don't know a thing about this guy, except all his records are sealed. And he voted 4 times against something called the Born Alive Infant Abortion Protection Act. But anyway, that's the only thing you know about this guy. But other than that, he's a complete mystery. You don't even know his name. We don't even know where he was born, literally. Okay, there's 3 documented places of birth that I know of. There's 2 hospitals in Hawaii, and many articles, not conspiracy articles, just regular articles, we're calling him Kenyan born. Okay, so we literally don't know the guy's name, and we literally don't know where he was born, but we know, supposedly, that he went to Columbia University, which represents, remember, the female, okay, or the East, or the cross, okay, the cross, the 4 sides of the square, squaring the circle. Okay, Isis is the 4 kingdoms of nature. Remember, we talked about the pyramid before. She represents the square, the flat earth, okay, the 3, 4, 5 triangle. You got the 3 vertical, the 4 horizontal, and connecting the 2 is the 5, the 3, 4, 5 triangle, which is the lowest form, or the whole number form that solves the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. But anyway, so there's Columbia right there, or the cross, or the 4 kingdoms of nature in the East. And there's Occidental, or the rose, okay, representing the rose plus the cross, or the Rosicrucians, or Robert Christian. Okay, now the Rosicrucian, or the Rosy Cross, just so happens to be the 18th degree of Freemasons. Okay, so what does that mean? Where does that come in? So if you go back to Revelation 13, verse 8, and it says to count or calculate the number of the beast, and it's the number of a man. Okay, it says calculate. It doesn't say it is 666. It doesn't say, some versions of the Bible may interpret this incorrectly, but if you go to the King James Version of the Bible, okay, it says to count, or some versions say calculate the number of the beast, 603 score and 6. So 6 plus 6 plus 6 is 18, where we get Robert Christian, or the Rosy Cross, or the rose plus the cross, or Osiris plus Isis. So now you can see the focal point of Egypt in the book of Exodus, for example, okay, and what Moses was getting at by taking on Pharaoh, this is what he was really taking on, okay, was ancient Egypt. But ancient Egypt never really went away, okay. Maybe physically the nation is no longer around, obviously, okay, or at least at the empire that it once was. I mean, obviously the nation of Egypt is still here, but it's not the world power that it was, say, 4,000 years ago, 3 to 4,000 years ago, okay. But philosophically and spiritually, Egypt still lives. Okay, now, Egypt was a derivation of Babylon. So you got Babylon, you got the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11, carried over to the new Tower of Babel, or at that time would be the Great Pyramid of Giza, and it's carried today symbolically into the United States, as I've just shown you, with the St. John's of Divine Cathedral right here, and of course the back of the Federal Reserve note, the capitalist pyramid, which just so happens to be on the back of this issue of U.S. News and World Report. So in other words, the conspiracy is not hidden. All right, it's in our faces with its middle finger in the air. It controls us. It even laughs at us. Okay, I find it hard to believe that these psychopaths, Satanists that run this country especially, are laughing their asses off at us, how stupid Americans are, how uneducated and brutish they are, thanks mostly to their free indoctrination centers known as the public schools. Okay, geopolitically, historically, constitutionally illiterate, beaten down. Okay, but anyway, so the stuff all connects. So you got the rose and the cross, you got the rosy cross, you got the Rosicrucians, Robert Christian. Now remember what I said before, what was the builder? The builder of these things here, the Georgia Guidestones, was Robert Christian, okay, who dedicated the Georgia Guidestones on March 22nd, 1980, which still happens to be 30 years to the date of the signing of the Rosicrucian-based healthcare law, this debacle known as Obamacare, right? That's just one example. But anyway, getting back, so I know we're doing a lot of bouncing back and forth. So what else do we see on here? We see the year 1618, but what is that really? That's in this, you can't really see it, but it's across here, 161618. 1.618 is the golden ratio. Okay, we just talked about that. That comes out of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Okay, and then flying up above here, we have baby Lucifer, or Horus, or Hermes, or Thoth. Okay, the son of God, the 5, floating around in a serpent. Okay, being carried by a serpent. Okay, can the symbolism be any more obvious? Okay, but it's 1604 wrapped around them. Now, what is 1604? Now, what is 1604? What's the significance of that? Well, it just so happens to be 14 years off of the golden ratio year of the Invisible College, or the College of the Rosicrucians, or the Rosy Cross. Now, remember before we said Osiris, the number of Osiris, or Apollo, or Apollyon of Revelation 9 is 14. And really that derives from if you take 2, 3, 4, 5 triangles and you lay them on top of each other, okay, you get 3 plus 3 plus 4 plus 4, you get 14. That's one of the sources of the 14 of Osiris, okay. So you get a difference of 14 years. Now, most accounts, now we're going to start getting into Robert Christian a little bit, and I'm just going to just dip into this a little bit. This character, Robert Christian, now again, on my site, I have a whole page on Robert Christian, and I could really on this link alone, there's 5 or 6 books in this link alone. Okay, so just realize I'm gonna have a 2-minute conversation on it, but there's literally I've probably got 300 pages written on this guy. Okay, of research that's available on my site, and it's all for free. So, by the way, if you want to really support and keep me going, help keep me going, you can buy the only thing for sale on my site is this book, Pleased to Meet You, and this book, The Un-American Genocidal Complex. Okay, I don't advertise, I don't sell, I'm not linked in with other websites. So, anyway, the Robert Christian link, the RC Christian link is there, and it's got a lot of information, but and suffice it to say for right now, and maybe we'll spend the whole show and go through these links and spend a little more time on it, but suffice it to say for right now that there's no record of this guy. You can't, it's literally impossible to nail down whether this guy, Robert Christian or Christian Rose Cross, or his German name, Christian Rosenkreuz, which is German for Rosy Cross. I mean, the Bavarian Illuminati, I mean, the Illuminati in Europe really got their start in Germany. The Illuminati, forerunners to communism, okay, founded on May 1st, 1776, which just so happens to be World Workers' Day and World Socialist Day, and Beltane, which is a New Age holiday for a bunch of echo-wacko weirdos. So very quickly, I mean, you could see that May 1st, 1776, which is the foundation of the Bavarian / German Illuminati, is a very significant date in world history. And that's a real group. I mean, you can find that in Webster's or in the encyclopedia, just Illuminati. That's a real historical group, okay? But supposedly one of the founders was this character, Robert Christian. Okay, Christian Rose Cross or Christian Rosenkreuz. The problem was the Illuminati were founded in 1776. Okay, the problem with that is that most historical accounts / legendary accounts, I'm not sure, I mean this literally, that this guy Robert Christian was born in was in 1378, which is about 400 years before he was supposedly running around forming the Bavarian Illuminati and hooking up with the Rothschilds. Okay, there are many connections, and this is now I'm jumping into real history now. There's Jim Marrs, for example, is another well-known conspiracy theorist, and he documents that this Robert Christian character was hooked up with the Rothschild family and the Bavarian Illuminati in the late 1700s. Okay. Again, the problem with that is most historical accounts that I came across have this guy being born in 1378, 400 years prior. So we're starting to run into issues here, okay? And it's evenly split on authors and historians, whether this guy really existed or not. Okay, it's very interesting, to say the least. Okay, but suffice it to say for right now that the most popular date that I could find for this guy's birth, or excuse me, his birth was 1378. Now what accounts, what they do, okay, is he was, no, excuse me, what did I say? His birth date is 1378, excuse me. Okay, so even I'm getting confused, and I've done a lot of research on this guy. So he was born in 1378, and he lived for 106 years, which would put his death at 1484, okay? Now, supposedly, according to some other accounts, this guy was dead for 120 years. Okay, now if you read Manly Hall, he's a high-level Freemason. He was a high-level Freemason in the first half of the 20th century, American. I think he was out in Los Angeles, the weirdos in California, those New Age weirdos. I mean, they can add Manly Hall to their resume out there. But anyway, he wrote that this guy really did exist, okay, and he's the father of Freemasonry. He's a very important figure in Freemasonry. Manly Hall, okay, he wrote this book. Okay, some people may have heard of some conspiracy, secret teachings of all ages, okay? And let me just say this, is that the guy, if you read this book, okay, it's this guy must have spent his whole life writing this book is the point. I mean, it's like a number 3 font, it's several hundred pages, it's just full of information, okay? And it's just, guy had to spend decades writing this book, but anyway, he opens up on the cover pages, the Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian symbolical philosophy. Masonic, Hermetic, Hermes. Okay, there's the Son of God, Hermes, the Kabbalah, the Jewish Kabbalah, which we've tied into the tree of life. Okay, which is, I don't really have time to get into that right now. I've talked about that on past shows, but suffice it to say that the Kabbalah is a study of numbers. Okay, which is the real meaning of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and we've talked about that on past shows. The Rosicrucian symbolical philosophy. The Rosicrucians, of course, what we're talking about, and he calls him Prince Ragazzi of Transylvania. Now, Transylvania, where's that name? Where we heard that before? Yeah, that's where Count Dracula came from. So you can see the stuff is getting really bizarre, all right, to say the least. Okay, Comte de Saint Germain. Now, another name for Christian Rose Cross or Robert Christian or Christian Rosenkreuz was the Comte de Saint Germain. Okay, now Saint Germain is another, again, did this guy really live, or is he just a legend? Nobody knows. Okay, nobody can say for sure. Now, Manly Hall is of the opinion that he really did live. Now, Manly Hall, and others too. There's others that coincide with this timeline. He was born 1378. He lived 106 years. Okay, now, so that puts him at 1484. Now you add 120 years to that. Now he was born in he was discovered 120 years after his death, according to Manly Hall, in his tomb, and he rose again. Now, is this true or not? I don't know. Okay, this is getting really bizarre, but now 1604. Now, where did we see that number? Okay, where did we see that number before? We saw it again. Little baby Lucifer. Okay, so you got this little Robert Christian up here. There's this little baby Horus or Hermes. Okay, the son of God, the son of Isis and Osiris, floating around here, 1604. Now, 14 years, 1618, the number, the golden ratio above the invisible college. Okay, 14 years. Now, what are these numbers? What are the significance of these numbers? Okay, well, let's just start with 106. Now, it just so happens to be the reflection of a number of 601. Now, 601 just so happens to be the age of Noah when at the end of the flood. Okay, now the flood started, he was 600, ended when he was 601. Now, the rallying cry, if you will, of the Rosicrucians or the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, or many New Ages, as below or as above, so below, and it's represented by the Jewish six-pointed star with, six-sided star. Okay, the so-called Star of David, which we see here. Okay, in the upper left-hand corner, you can't really see it. There's the Star of David, so-called. It's two triangles, upside down. One opposing each other. It's the symbolism, or it's as below, so above. Okay, that's the Emerald Tablet. Okay, supposedly written by Hermes thrice great. Okay, which we just pointed out. Okay, is this guy right here. Okay, as above, so below, and it's written right here. Okay, it's the base of the so-called ancient mysteries, but they're not really mysteries because it's just going back to Genesis chapter 3. Again, it's all kind of put into this facade of kind of make-believe Dan Brown, so people don't believe it, but the numbers are there. Okay, so in other words, by him being alive for 106 years, it's actually a reflection of Noah and the flood. Noah coming out of the flood at 601. Now, you may think, well, I'm stretching the limit, but the funny part is that if you go to this thing here, St. John's the Divine Cathedral, right here in my candidate for Mystery Babylon, you go in there and lo and behold, they tell you the thing's 601 feet long. That's one of the dimensions of this thing. Okay, so that's an odd number, 601 feet long. So what is that? Again, that's a dedication to Saint Germain or Robert Christian or Christian Rose Cross or whatever you want to call them. Okay, so you got 601 and 106 in reflecting each other. Okay, these two numbers reflecting each other. Then he's dead for 120 years. Now, what is 120? That's how old Moses was when he died. Okay, and one of the characters that this magazine and other people, but here they associate with this Hermes thrice great, okay, because what they try to do is they try to say, well, you know, Moses and history got it wrong, and Moses is really, you know, this great philosopher, and the Freemasons try and claim him as one of their own because they're missing the point of the Bible. I mean, they leave out little details like the 10th plague of Egypt, where Moses, you know, God said, I'm going to darken this place tonight on the 430 year to the day that the Israelites were made slaves into Egypt. If you read Exodus chapter 12, and that has huge significance in the book of Daniel. We don't have time to get into that right now, in the 1290 days and that sort of thing. But right now, just suffice it to say that Moses was 120 years when he died. So these stupid Freemasons are stupid, as I'm saying, they're fools. Okay, that you know, they forget details like that, and they just focus on, you know, Moses as a philosopher. But it says right here, Hermes thrice great, okay, which is Hermes or Thoth, okay, which I believe is the real Satan, okay, walking the earth, just like Genesis chapter 3, just like Cain is identified in Satan as Satan, okay, in the Old Testament, in, you know, Genesis 4, he's a vagabond on the earth, and, you know, John chapter 8, you know, calls Satan a murderer from the beginning, and of course the first murderer was who? Was Cain. He murdered his brother Abel. But anyway, so this Hermes character, this Thoth Hermes character, Hermes thrice great, so they associate him with Moses, Pythagoras, the Pythagorean theorem, okay, 3-4-5 triangle, and Zoroaster, okay, which formed a Persian religion called Zoroasterism, and, you know, another form of the Osiris, the sun god, called Mithras. I mean, he's in this article too. We don't have time to get into that right now, but it looks an awful lot like the Statue of Liberty, Lady Liberty, so-called, which is not a coincidence either. Okay, more like the Whore of Babylon. You know, aligned with my candidate for Mystery Babylon. I know people don't want to hear that, but anyway, not to go off on that tangent right now. So in other words, Moses lived 120 years, so now things are starting to get interesting. Now this Hermes thrice great, supposedly it was dead for 120 years. Now that brings us to the year 1604. Again, our baby Lucifer flying around above the invisible college with 1604 wrapped around him. 14 years, the number of Osiris should come up to the golden ratio, or the number embedded in the Great Pyramid of Giza, which sits on the back of our Federal Reserve note. Okay, so you add 14 to 1604, you come up with the golden ratio of 1618. Okay, and who's in the middle of this whole mess but this mysterious character known as Robert Christian? Now remember, we still don't know if this guy really lived or not. Okay, and I mean that. I'm not saying that to be funny. Okay, I'm talking about multiple sources here from multiple well-known historians, and I get into that a little bit, okay, in this first link here. Who is Robert Christian? Now, in other words, I can't figure this out. Nobody can. Okay, he's associated with everything from Count Dracula to some character that lived and died from 1378 and was at the forefront of the Rosicrucian Enlightenment, or the Enlightenment in Europe. Okay, he was around then, and he's around again around the foundation of the Bavarian Illuminati in the late 1700s. Okay, and he's running around then, but again, and there he was considered a real historical figure. He had to be 400 years old. Okay, and according to Manly Hall, he was seen multiple times. He appeared out of nowhere, and he never aged. Okay, and I'm just going to give you a hint. Okay, that is the basis. That's the inspiration to the Satan character in this book. Okay, pleased to meet you. So if you this Robert Christian, it's kind of wrapped up in that, and that was the inspiration. Okay, because this is who our leaders are following. Okay, now just in this. Okay, just in the first link, I'm just going to read you the different identities of this Robert Christian. Okay, I got R.C. Christian, Robert Christian, Christian Rosenkreutz, the Count of Saint Germain, Prince Ragosi of Transylvania, Father C.R.C., and Hiram of Biff. Okay, the master builder of Solomon's Temple. Now, Hiram of Biff, the legend of Hiram of Biff is basically he was killed by fellow Masons for not giving up his secrets. And again, the analogy goes back to what we were talking about before. Hiram of Biff equates to Osiris, who we were talking about before. Now, he's the Hiram of Biff, him being murdered and killed, again, the symbolism is mankind being kicked out of the Garden of Eden by what they say is the evil God for trying to read the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Okay, that sits at the core of Freemasonry. You can read any book on Freemasons, even the so-called mainstream books, and they'll talk about the legend of Hiram Abiff. But that's what it is. Okay, so when these morons and these liars get on the History Channel and try and tell you, well, that's just conspiracy theory. Read any book on Freemasonry at Barnes and Noble. Don't take my word for it, and read about Hiram Abiff, and that's what it is. You go into the George Washington's Masonic Temple in Alexandria, Virginia, and half the floors are dedicated to symbolism right out of ancient Egypt. All right, so I don't. That's another thing I don't get. And by the way, George Washington, I know a lot of my fellow conspiracy kooks want to, assign him to the Freemasons and even the foundation of this country as part of the quote conspiracy. I don't buy that at all. I think that's ridiculous. Okay, for the simple fact that so many of our criminal elites have spent the last 100 years bashing this country into the ground and its Christian foundations and its constitution. They have to get rid of it. So how can they sit there and say with a straight face that America's founding was part of the quote conspiracy and part of the Illuminati, and George Washington, who was the glue that held this nation together during the Revolution and after it, the first president, a war hero? How could you sit there and say with a straight face that the foundation of this nation was part of the conspiracy? And the quote conspiracy, as I've just said, with the education system and the political system and the media, has been bashing this country to pieces, and they've succeeded for the past 100 years. And you can't have the United States, with its constitution and its hard money system, can't be allowed to survive and expect to have worldwide control. You can't have this spreading of political power as is specified in the Constitution, and have a one world government and have these creeps, these satanic creeps take over like they're trying to. So just as an aside, that's just a ridiculous notion. Now, I know there's a few of the founders, the jury's still out on. Thomas Jefferson, was he a Christian? Wasn't he a founder? I know in Alexander Hamilton, even Ben Franklin, okay, I agree it's marginal. I can go either way. But the organic, dyed-in-the-wool colonist, okay, founding father was a devout Christian. The revolution, the divine miracles associated with George Washington and a revolution, how he won the revolution, okay, I just don't buy it. It's just stupid, all right? In other words, if we followed the Constitution, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in right now. So, and the people running this country and running the banking system, the Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, they know this. Okay, that's why they've spent the last 100 years, the tax-exempt foundations, funding all these Ivy League idiots and these other people who go out and spread these lies about albeit imperfect, but the greatest nation in the history of the world. But anyway, just getting back to our friend Robert Christian here, I break this down into 4 parts: the physical Robert Christian, the mythical/physical Robert Christian, and the mystical Robert Christian, and the background of the Rose Cross. Now, again, you can read each one of these sections and say that, physically that this guy existed according to many historians. Okay, some of these are conspiracy theorists, some of them are mainstream historians. Okay, and then you can go to the mystical Robert Christian, and it's people that say, well, he never really existed. So the point is, who the hell, no pun intended, is this guy? Okay, and he just so happens to have a lot in common with this image of the beast sitting in the White House. Okay, I'll just go right out there and say it. And then it goes into the mystical R.C. Christian, and I go on and I tie everything together in different links. Okay, the Egyptian god Thoth, Hermes, Mercury, okay, Hermes thrice great, okay, right here in this article in U.S. News and World Report, going to a discussion about the Jewish Pharisees and the Kabbalah, Count Dracula. Now you may laugh, okay, but Robert Christian was the inspiration of Count Dracula. Okay, this half historical, half mythical figure that nobody can figure out. As a matter of fact, one author wrote a book, I can't remember her name, Yarbo or something. I think she's in this link. And she says that she used to come up with her, she wrote a book called, I don't remember the top of my head. I got to find out. Here it is, Miss Yarbrough. Okay. Now here's the back cover of her book called The Saint Germain Chronicles. Okay. Now in his 4,000 years, now she's got this guy spread out, legend, this guy spread out over 4,000 years. Okay. This book was just printed, I don't know, in, let's say this nation, let's just say the mid 20th century. So 4,000 years puts you back around ancient Egypt, around 2000 BC, the Egyptian Empire. In his 4,000 years, the Count has known royalty and rabble, artists, spies, adulteresses, and the most beautiful women in the world. From the glittering capitals of 18th century Europe to modern New York, he appears again and again and again. Now, she goes on to say, now even she's not sure if this guy's a real figure or not, but the point is, now according to her, the legend of the Count of Saint Germain stretches over 4,000 years. So again, who the hell is this guy? Robert Christian, okay, founder of the Georgia Guidestones, the anti-Ten Commandments, okay, the guy used the euphemism Robert Christian, okay, and he sits at the core of what I call the un-American genocidal complex, okay, and again, his symbolism is also found in the Invisible College. Now remember the Invisible College, the rose plus the cross, okay, the cross, the east, Columbia, plus the rose, the rose is the west, is the Occidental College, supposedly, and the east, Columbia University, supposedly, or the rose, now the rose, or the cross, now the cross, the four kingdoms of nature. So you get the 3-4-5 triangle of ancient Egypt right there. So now we have the image of the beast of the Rosicrucians running the White House, running this nation, in a nation known as Mystery Babylon, as we're coming up against an impending economic collapse of biblical proportions, and World War III, by the way. So this psychopath in the White House and his band of merrymakers are pushing us into World War III. Now, could that be the chaos that's going to supposedly is going to predate the order? Okay, so in other words, the New World Order. So in other words, to have order, first you have to have chaos. You have to shake out the world and get rid of, say, 6.5 billion people. Now, anti-Ten Commandment number 1 on these things, the Georgia Guidestone says, maintain humanity under 500 million people. Okay, so are those things serious? I say they are. Okay, and it's happening before our eyes. Okay, this is why it's all focused right here in the United States. Okay, the core of this whole satanic, psychopathic lowlifes, okay, Rockefeller and friends, the skull and bones crowd, is right here in the United States. It's not Israel. It's not physical Babylon in Iraq. The whole stupid weapons of mass destruction. A bunch of so-called Christian evangelicals fell into that trap, lock, stock, and barrel. The United States invaded Iraq. Oh yeah, Babylon's going to be rebuilt, and there's your Mystery Babylon, you stupid. Okay, I never subscribed to any of that. It just never struck me as making sense that the United States would not appear anywhere in biblical prophecy, like so many experts have been telling us for so long. And the whole time we're right smack in the middle of it, courtesy of the Invisible College, Hermes Thrice Great, and our new friend Robert Christian. Okay, and the Invisible College. Now remember, this thing right here, this group of intellectuals, so-called of the Enlightenment, the European Enlightenment, centered in England mostly, gave rise to something called the British Roundtable groups. Okay, or excuse me, the Royal Society. Which in turn gave us something called the British Roundtable groups, based on the legend of King Arthur. Now, King Arthur is another character in England, who was a hero of England when they were being invaded by I think it was the Gauls in France and other barbarians from mainland Europe, and whether King Arthur existed or not, and Excalibur and Camelot and all that, whether King Arthur existed is again is a debate among historians, or is he a conglomeration of war heroes and kings in England that fought these barbarians? Nobody knows, but it did give rise. It was inspiration for these British roundtable groups. They surely took him seriously, just like they take Robert Christian seriously, just like they take ancient Egyptian mythology seriously. Okay. So you had the British roundtable groups, and that gave us our very own, in this nation, the Council on Foreign Relations. And over in England, I think they call the equivalent of the Council on Foreign Relations, I think they call it Chatham House. Okay. And then the Council on Foreign Relations, of course, the bane of many, quote, conspiracy kooks like yours truly, gave us, from that spun off things like the Bilderberg Group, formed by Rockefeller, and this Prince Bernhard from ex-Nazi over in the Netherlands, I think it was in 1954. So every year the most powerful business, media, banking tycoons in the world get together the original meeting was at the Bilderberg Hotel. I think it was in the Netherlands, and that's where they got the name Bilderberg Group. But now they meet once a year somewhere around the world. And, InfoWars, the website InfoWars, probably does the best job of covering this every year. It's usually around June of every year. The mainstream media doesn't cover it because most of their, Rupert Murdoch and most of the major media honchos are there, and it's all hush-hush. So while it's important that this stupid swimmer in Rio, whatever he did or didn't do, well, that gets headlines. I mean, a meeting of several hundred of the world's most powerful people gets zero coverage on Fox News. The so-called conservative, the voice of conservative America, that facade that does. Anyway, so they're tied in with the Bilderberg Group. And of course the Trilateral Commission, okay, a very powerful group formed by another Rockefeller, and his offshoots, Zbigniew Brzezinski, this old bag Brzezinski, which is still around, another one pushing for World War III, another psychopath, goes back several decades, him and Kissinger, okay, another Rockefeller underling, okay, another psychopathic Secretary of State warmonger, Henry Kissinger, okay, another one with the population control and all this sort of thing. By the way, if you follow the strings, the monetary strings, the environmental movement, not only do you run into George Soros, you run into people like Rockefeller and Kissinger and the United Nations and the Club of Rome, and that's all documented in this book. Okay, that's why I call it the Un-American Genocidal Complex. And of course, what's all in the middle of this whole thing with the Georgia Guidestones? Okay, what I call the anti-Ten Commandments, or the Ten Commandments of the radical environmental movement. And I'm not talking about the people saving whales. I'm talking about the people that want to, the Ted Turners and the others that want to limit the world population, or cut it down by 6 billion or more people. Now, how the hell are you going to do that short of, deploying the AIDS virus or starting World War III, or an economic collapse that's going to cause millions, hundreds of millions of people to just die from lack of medical care, the food chain is going to break down, and you're just going to have chaos of biblical proportions. Okay, this is what's headed our way. Okay, by the Satanists, this psychopath running the world. Okay, and the signs and the symbols are all around us. Okay, so again, just for a quick review, Invisible College, Robert Christian, Rose Cross, 18th degree of Freemasonry, 6+6+6 degree of Freemasonry, brought to us by a bunch of Satan-worshipping psychopaths. 1618, 1618, the Golden Ratio, the Great Pyramid, we discussed that. Little baby Lucifer with the serpent, 1604, symbolic of the, well, we're not so sure of the symbolic birth and death of Robert Christian, or Christian Rosencreutz, whose legend spreads across, who knows, several hundred years or 4,000 years. Okay, who just so happens to align with the son of the sun god Osiris, Thoth, Hermes, and Mercury. Okay, who just so happens to align with Occident, or sun setting in the west, or the rose window. Okay, which is just below. It's not in this photo, but just below this Great Pyramid of Giza in St. John's Divine Cathedral, we have the rose window facing west, again, symbolizing the west or the Occident or the setting sun. Of course, then you have the east or Columbia, okay, representing the female or rebirth, okay, or the Son of God, rising again. The Son of God. So Osiris rises again. Isis, the whore of Babylon. Now, if you go back, the whore, now you can see, like, you read the book of Hosea. Okay, right in the middle of this whole thing, by the way, is the Jews and the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah, it's Kabbalah, or some people spell it with a Q, Qabalah. You can just Google it and read about the Kabbalah. But basically what it is a bunch of Jewish mystics and the high-level Jewish Pharisee types studying ancient Canaanite and Egyptian religion of the Old Testament. So basically, in the book of Hosea, when Ezekiel 17, Ezekiel 23, and pretty much the Old Testament, God's chosen people. When God says you're nothing but a bunch of spiritual whores, that's really what he's talking about. Okay, he's talking about they're whoring themselves religiously and spiritually by studying what the serpent told them to study back in Genesis chapter 3. Okay, so you can see it, how this whole thing ties together, and why my 3 biblical principles, number 2 is, these idiots that want to say that, Israel is God's chosen people. Israel's a bunch of Satan worshippers, okay? They were worshiping Satan along with the Canaanites and the Egyptians, and this is, just read the book of Hosea, for example. Okay, that's the whole point. Hosea marries his wife Gomer, and it's the symbolism. God says it. Gomer symbolizes the whore, my former chosen people who acted just like the whore, just like Eve did in the Garden of Eden. Okay, and of course, Adam joined her soon after, and that's how you get the fall of mankind. But anyway, that's really the symbolism. That's really what's at play here. But anyway, again, what is that represented by? Columbia in the east, or the sun rising in the east, the Son of God rising. Think about Obama's O symbol, okay? So the guy's name not even Obama. So that stupid O that you see with the rising sun, that's really what it was, okay? That's really what it was. And I just want to, if I can find it here in all my papers here, we can discuss the. Let's see if I can find it here real quickly. But speaking of Obama, so again, never attended Columbia University. I can't stress that enough. We're not sure if he attended Occidental University, but somebody stuck this guy in there. Okay, just like he stuck themselves between the Freemasonic columns of Jachin and Boaz. Okay, Jachin and Boaz, there he is, DNC 2008. There's your Son of God, Robert Christian. Okay, I'll just throw another name on Barack Obama and call him Robert Christian. There he is in the 2008 DNC. Okay, and of course, if you want to see, the Freemason, these are the columns of Freemasonry. Okay, you got the male and the female again, Isis and Osiris, the sun god, Osiris, the west, Occident, the lunar. Okay, the female goddess, the silver, the gold, the silver. And these two lovelies get together. There's our little, satanic pentagram, okay, with the G, great architect of the universe, floating around in between, okay, with the all-seeing eye, Lucifer, okay, the all-seeing eye, where we, the all-seeing eye. The symbolism, hopefully by now you're starting to catch on that this stuff's all around us, and it's being planned on our behalf. So again, on my website, boxofsunglasses.com, is God's Simple Salvation Plan. That's the only thing that's really going to save people at this point. If you think Donald Trump is going to save the day, you're woefully mistaken. Granted, Trump gives some credit for eliciting the response from these satanic morons and their media underlings, these idiots in the media. But he's not going to stop this thing. There's no way in hell, no pun intended, that Trump's a bump in the road. Trump's a speed bump on the highway to hell. That's all Trump is. Okay? He'll give a little resistance. He'll shake things up a little bit, but that's it. Okay, so boxofsunglasses.com, God's Simple Salvation Plan is probably the best thing I can offer right now, if nothing else, on the website. And that'll be it. Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll continue with this journey into the man of mystery, Robert Christian, or Christian Rose Cross, Barry Soetoro, Barack Obama, Occident and Colombia. All right, good night.